to another episode of Jim's Allotment Garden. Okay, a quick pumpkin and courgette and squash update. As you can see, the plants are starting to die off a little bit now. The leaves are going a little bit yellow, which is to be expected at this time of year. But the pumpkins, as you can see, there's a good sized pumpkin in there. And then, if I could just quickly step through here, I'll try not to step on the plant. As you can see, there's a whopper under there, so that's got to be about 18 inches across. That's a really nice sized pumpkin, and I've got another one. I don't know if you can see it, but it's just in there. If I can just zoom in, it's just sort of in there, if you like. But I don't want to walk across the plants because I'm frightened of damaging the plants. Butternut squashes are also monster. There's one growing there underneath. As you can see, the good size there. Another pumpkin here. So they're all kind of hiding underneath the plants now. What I could actually do is take that one off now and let that ripen off the plant. But the butternut squashes are kind of this side, and the fruits are all over really. There's another one there. I'll just zoom in. That one looks more like a bottle gourd, but they sort of stretch all the way over there. There's actually I think there's 6 pumpkins all told. There's another one down there hiding amongst the leaves, and there's one in here as well. To give you an idea, that's the size of my hand. So they're about 14. That one's about 14 inches across. So they have done really well this year. But as I say, the plants themselves are starting to die back a bit now. They're nowhere near as full as they were a couple of weeks ago. So I think they're starting to die back a little bit. There's another butternut squash. So I'll be giving them a bit of water tonight again. Now the courgettes are amongst these weeds here. As you can see, they're growing really well. Now there's a few here that I've let grow, so the chickens will end up with that one tonight, which will encourage these others to carry on growing here. And there's a few at the back there that we've not managed to eat and turn into marrows. So as you can see there, look, they're growing really well, but they're a little bit overwhelmed by weeds at the minute. And in hindsight, I think I planted them a little bit closer than perhaps I should have done, but they have done really well. Okay, so as you can see, the potato plants have all died back now. As you can see, these are the plants here. So I'm now going to dig up this first root. Now this year, to be honest with you, the tops haven't been brilliant. So I really don't know what to expect under the ground. It's been quite a dry year really, but these have been watered through the ground irrigation system. So I'm just putting the fork in just off the screen here, and that's about a foot or so away from the plant. And I'm just getting it actually under the plant like that, just pulling up gently, and not bad potatoes at all. There's no slug damage on there, so that's a really nice potato, about the size of my hand. Now these, if I just get this out of the way, that's the irrigation pipe there. I'm just pulling that out of the way. Now any topsy potatoes, always dispose of these, don't compost them, because you know you can get sort of diseases and stuff from there. But that one's a little bit split. Now that's due to going dry and then being watered. That's when they expand quickly. A couple of little ones. Another good one again. That's got a split in it. but it'll cook just the same. That's a good potato. A few little ones. Oh, come out the way, Dorothy. Alright. So, not a bad root actually. I've got a few reasonable sized potatoes there. I'll show you what they all look like in a minute when I've got them all out. So you need to dig reasonably deeply to get them all. And I think off one root that's not too bad. Some small ones again. And whilst the weather's dry, this is the ideal time to dig them up because the potatoes will be clean, and the they won't be there won't be too much dirt on them. They won't be muddy. So this is the best time to dig them up if you're going to store them anyway. Well, any reason really, whichever way you're going to do with them. But yeah, that looks like the first root. So I've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13, 15 potatoes off there, and the average one is probably about that kind of size. So as you can see, we've got a couple of bakers out. So that'll do for a baker. That one will do for a baker, and the rest of them will be okay. So I'll just do a second root because you can never tell from one root. So this is about 2 foot away or so. I'm not sure how this one's going to turn out, but again, you can see this is where it's gone dry and they've suddenly been watered and they've expanded. That's why you've got that split in there. So they don't look particularly pretty, but they taste just as good, so I'm not too worried about that. And the ground is quite heavy actually. It's quite dry here. As I say, I've not watered the potatoes too much because I didn't want to encourage slugs, because I was worried about slugs this year with the weather the way it's been. So that root wasn't quite as good, I don't think. Unless there's some in there that I've not found yet. No, I think that's pretty much it. But for the first 2 roots, that's not bad at all. Now what I'm going to do now is do a root just behind, kind of this way. So I'll just move the camera and I'll show what this one here looks like. Now these here have had an irrigation pipe on them, and the irrigation pipe goes all the way around and is just about 1 metre short. So this plant behind hasn't got an irrigation pipe. So I just want to see the difference it's made with and without. Okay, so this is the row here that hasn't had the irrigation pipe at the end. And the first root is kind of here. Always be careful, because I've dug potatoes out like this a few times and broken the fork. So I'm always overly cautious when I dig potatoes out, because if you go too deep too soon, you can most certainly break your fork off. So these potatoes aren't too bad, as you can see, not too bad. But I'll show you the difference between the ones that have had irrigation on and the ones that haven't. And by the look of it, there's not a vast amount of difference. So I'll just put the fork in again. As soon as you've had it in the first time, it should be easier. Actually, this one is ironically better without irrigation, I think. Loads of potatoes, I think. So I'll just carry on digging this and I'll show you what it looks like, what the potatoes look like in a moment. Okay, so that's 2 roots with potatoes with irrigation. So as you can see, I've got a reasonable amount, but that is 1 root with no irrigation. So as you can see, the potatoes, there's a lot more potatoes, they're slightly smaller, but they're more of a sort of unified size. I mean, that's not, you know, you could probably get away with baking that one. The rest of them, I'd say, are good for boiling and that, but that's what the potatoes look like. So I have had a little bit of a disaster in the greenhouse. These were the broccoli plants, and these little critters, which are caterpillars, I'm assuming that they are cabbage white, have managed to get in here and absolutely shred them. As you can see, in many occasions all there's left is the actual stalk of the plant, but I pulled off something like 50 caterpillars out of here last night. Now, the day before yesterday, they were all perfectly healthy and nice big leaves on like this, and they were growing quite nicely. I came up last night and they'd gone through these like a dose of salt, and as you can see, you know, I wasn't 100% vigilant when I was looking for eggs, and unfortunately they've gone in there and they've shredded them, and all the ones that I hadn't pricked out, they've also shredded these as well. So as you can see there, the little caterpillars there, and all you can do is just put your finger through them really. But as I say, you know, they've completely shredded all of these. There's one there as well. But these are, and you can see how many there are on there. Like, can you see all of those? Hundreds of them. You know, it only takes one butterfly to come in here, and they'll lay 30 or 40 eggs on a plant, and then before you know where you are, the plants are absolutely shredded. But anyway, that's one disaster for this year. Hopefully that there won't be any more, but it looks like I'm going to try and get these plants to recover. It's unlikely that they will, but nevertheless I'm going to put them outside so they've got some sunlight, and hopefully they'll, or at least some of them will recover. Okay, quick update on the winter veg that we put in. Now these are the swede here. As you can see, that beetle is nibbled at the leaves a little bit. Not a lot I can do about that, I'm afraid. But that's the rows. You can see they're growing pretty well. These are the swede that we put in earlier here amongst the weeds. Now in here is the turnips, and as you can see, they are actually coming in there. And this, I've got the same problem where the beetles have eaten the leaves. You can see the little seedlings there, so they are starting to come through. They're not as good as the swede, but they are most, you know, the turnips are most certainly coming through. And then here we've got the beetroot. So I don't know if you can see the row just there underneath the string, and at the back as well. You can see a little bunch of them there. So they have all come through. Now I've watered these a couple of times. They're due for a bit of water again tonight, so I've watered them sort of a couple of times a week. But as you can see, they come through. Within 4 days they were actually starting to come through. So this time of year, whilst the ground is warm, they do come through really quickly. But you can see the rows. If I actually water them, you can actually see they're more obvious, but as you can see, the rows are coming through. And this is a week after them being planted. So they are doing pretty well, but unfortunately I've got this beetle problem again, where they're nibbling at the leaves with these little holes. If it'll focus. These little holes that you get on the leaves, that's the beetle nibbling at them. And I don't really know anything I can do about that, but all being well, they won't nibble them too much, and they'll carry on growing. Okay, so I want to do a few of the comments and questions that have come over the past couple of weeks. The first one comes from Victoria Holmstrom, and she was asking about the steel poles that I got that were about about 1.5 metres high. What they were actually called. Now in the UK, these are called either line pins or fence pins, and they're typically used by people who do the work on the side of roads and stuff like that, and builders and things. And they're basically a steel pole about sort of 1.5 metres high, with like this sort of hook thing on the top. Now they are well, in the UK they're readily available. Hopefully you'll be able to get something in from where you live, but I think if you just get steel poles, I think they'll probably do just as good a job. If you can't get the exact same thing, but I'd look around for a steel merchant, and normally they're not, you know, particularly expensive. As you put in your comment, you know, I only paid £1 for each of the poles that I got, and they'll you know, they'll last me for 20-30 years, if not more. So you know, it's a good investment for the future. The next one comes from Don's Allotment, and he was talking about the problem that I've got with bindweed. Now, I actually filled a couple of barrows full of bindweed. I tied back all the raspberries this week, and the bindweed that had grown through was just incredible. I was literally pulling it out by the armful, and so it is quite a big problem now. I've dug it out a number of times in the allotment, and the problems with bindweed is it goes down 2 or 3 foot into the ground, and it's really difficult to basically to get it all out. And you've only got to leave you know, sort of 10 millimeters of the root in the ground, and that will grow again. Unfortunately, this top quarter of the allotment is absolutely full of it now. The strawberry patch is absolutely full of it, and all the raspberries and that, and also I'm seeing a few bits coming out in the asparagus here. So what Don's actually advised is, he said he had the same problem with bindweed, and what he's done is he's put Resolver on there, which is a systemic weed killer. Now, systemic means that what it actually does is it soaks into the plant, and it'll go down into the roots, and it'll kill the roots as well. A lot of weed killers just kill the top of the plant, and the root still survives. But a systemic weed killer will get into the plant, will go down into the roots, and will kill all of those off as well. So I will have a go at that. I don't think there's any organic solution to killing this bindweed off, so I think I'm going to have to resort to something non-organic, but so be it. I'm afraid that's you know, I'm afraid sometimes you have to just say, I can't dig it out. I've tried, you know, over the past 10 years I've been digging it out and digging it out, and it's just come back with a vengeance this year. So I think I need to take a bit more drastic action and spray it with some Resolver, and hopefully not spray everything else in the process. The next comment comes from King Cactus 2000, and he was saying, what are you feeding your chilies on? Now, the chilies, basically what you need to do with chilies is, at this time of the year, is feed them with any fertiliser which is potassium rich, and what that will do is encourage it to grow flowers and fruits and stuff like that. It's potassium that you need to develop the fruits and the flowers. So any sort of tomato feed will do that for you. What you can do from an organic point of view, the comfrey tea that I make, basically just get a comfrey plant, chop it down, put it into a container, it'll break down, and then the juice that you get from that, don't add any water, just basically put all the stalks and shoots and leaves in there. That'll all break down over 2 or 3 weeks, and then the water that comes off that, just pour that into a watering can, mix it down 10 to 1 and water that on your chilies. That'll do perfectly well. That's an organic way of doing it. If you don't have that, there's loads of different tomato feeds out there. Obviously Tomarite is one, which is what I suggested on the comment. Tomarite looks like this. It isn't organic, but that's a feed that you can use, you know, on your chilies, and that'll encourage them to grow flowers and fruits and stuff like that, and that'll make them a lot more productive than they would be normally. Next couple of comments come from Victoria Holstrom again. The first one is herbs. A couple of questions on herbs. She was saying that she's planted some herb plants, and they've not done sort of particularly well. With herbs, they're not greedy plants. They're not you know, they don't like a soil which is too nutritious. However, what you do need to do is have some organic material in there. Obviously, you've got to have some goodness in the material, you know, good material in the ground. So what I suggest you do is the ground, when you're preparing it, dig in some organic material, either compost, manure, or you know, sort of chippings, or stuff like that. Dig it all in the ground. You do need a well draining soil. So you know, you don't want them to be sat in sort of heavy clay soil. So if you have got soil which is quite heavy in clay and stuff like that, what you need to do is put some either gravel or sand in there, and you know, break it up a little bit. Now, for the first couple of years, what you will need to do is give them a little bit of water, just to, you know, until the roots have established, you know, they've really got the roots into the ground. But after that, you shouldn't really need to water them unless the conditions get really, you know, sort of dry. Over the winter, if you are in Sweden, what you need to do is sort of protect them for the first few years. The woody herbs, what you need to do is put some mulch around the bottom of them, and that will protect the plant from the colder weathers. But they should survive during the winter as long as they got themselves well established. What you can do is put some fleece over them as well. But what I'll do is get some bark chippings or wood chippings and just mulch them. That will do two things. One, it'll protect them from frost. But it'll also hold the moisture in the ground a little bit as well, just to to give them a boost in their first few years. The second question was strawberry leaves. Now, strawberry plants, what you need to be looking at is strawberry leaves should be, irrespective of the variety of the strawberries, the leaves should be green with no marks on them at all. If you've got black spots, red spots, or any sort of browning in the leaves, take the leaf off the plant and don't compost it, burn it, or dispose of it in a bin or whatever. Don't try and compost it, because what those spots and browning in the leaves are typically formed by fungus, and if you compost that and put that back into the garden, what you're doing is you're encouraging that fungus back into the garden. So what you need to do is remove those leaves, bag them up, and either burn them or dispose of them in another way. But don't put them on, don't put them back into the ground, basically. And then the strawberry plants will then grow new green leaves, and then your strawberries will be a lot healthier. If you have got neighbours who have got strawberries as well, these funguses will spread. So you need to keep vigilant. And if you do see any leaves with any spots on, whether they be red, black, brown, remove the leaves straight away and dispose of them. Don't leave them on there, because it'll spread throughout all of your plants. Next comment comes from Lorraine Robbins, and she was saying, in response to me taking all the onions out a couple of weeks ago, she was saying, do you wash the onions? No, I don't. This year, obviously, because I had that fungal problem on them, what I did do was take out the outer shells of the onion, like the brown, I sort of peeled them back. Any that looked damaged, I took them off, but I never wash onions. With onions, what you want to do is keep them dry as possible, because that's if they're moist, then that's when you can get rot and fungus forming and stuff like that. So you need to keep them dry as much as you possibly can do. So all I do basically is just take off any damaged material, take off any of the damaged leaves, and then just turn them upside down and leave them to dry. I don't wash them in any way, shape or form. Obviously when I use them in the kitchen, what I will do then is peel them and then wash them just before I use them. But whilst I'm storing them, I'll leave them exactly the way they are. Next comment from Lorraine was she's had some problems starting winter veg off in the garden. She's got some mould problems in her allotment vegetable patch, and she was saying any hints and tips on growing things in modules. There's no reason why you can't start winter veg in modules. It's easy enough to be done. But what I would suggest you do is obviously use some modules kind of like that that I've got these fuchsias in. And what you need to do is sow the seeds into the modules. But what I would suggest you do is put the modules outside. Don't try them. You can germinate them in the greenhouse, but what I would suggest this time of year, because most people's greenhouses are full of, like this one is, it's like a jungle in here. I've got tomato plants, cucumbers, grapevines and stuff like that. There's not a lot of light in here, so they're going to be struggling for light. So what I would suggest you do is put them outside where they've got plenty of light, and then as soon as they've germinated, they can grow normally then. Otherwise the plants are going to get a little bit sort of leggy, because they're going to be trying to search for light. So what I would suggest you do to get healthy, strong plants is put them outside. If you've got a bench or a little piece of ground where it's not being used and you've got no moles on there, just put them on there. Make sure they're kept watered, because they will dry out in the modules quite quickly. What you can do is put some of that cloth underneath them that I showed you, the black fleece cloth, there's some down there which can take me a while to get it out, or an old sheet or something like that, and sit the modules on there, and then what will happen is when you water them, that cloth or that mat underneath will get wet, and that'll stop your seedlings from drying out. And obviously when they're young, the last thing you want is for them to dry out, because that's where some damage will be caused by that. So what I would suggest you do is put them on a surface outside, put a blanket down, or some of that cloth that I showed you. Any old sheets or blankets will do. And then what that'll do is it'll keep the atmosphere around them moist and damp, and then that'll be the best for them to to grow, and they won't dry out. And then as soon as they've got to, I don't know, sort of 2, 3, 4 inches high, you can then put them out in the ground. And for your moles, what I would suggest you do is put some bamboo canes into the ground, and then put a empty Coca-Cola bottle, you know, the plastic 2-litre bottles. Turn that upside down and put it on the stick. And when the wind blows, it'll rattle. That sound goes into the ground, and moles don't like that, so they'll typically go away from it. So when you put them in the rows in the garden, plant your little seedlings out, and then put some canes in the ground round them with this with a Coke bottle on the top, you know, sort of, I don't know, a metre or so off the ground. And what that will do is it will deter the moles from that area, you know, whilst they're establishing themselves. Next comment is from Victoria Holstrom again, and she was saying onions. I've grown 500 odd onions in the garden this year. That's pretty much all the onions that I use in the year. So what I will do is I'll store them, tie them up, and I'll show you that in the next week or so. It may even be in this video, to be honest with you. What I'll do is tie them up and store them in the shed. As long as it's not too hot or too cold, the onions will store. Keep them in the dark, and then they'll store for 12 months. I'm still eating onions now that I grew last year, and I'm about to string up the new ones for the next year. So they will store, you know, sort of quite well in a shed, as long as it's dark, well ventilated, and it's not too hot or cold. Obviously, if it freezes, you need to be careful. The next comment comes from, sorry, I've just seen a chili on the floor. The next comment comes from Mick Watson, and he was talking about storing turnips. There's a few ways you can do this. I personally don't store turnips. What I do is I leave them in the ground, and then take them out the ground as and when I need them. So as soon as they get to kind of that big, you know, you can start to eat them, and then they can grow to potentially something that big. So as soon as they get small, you can start to pull them and eat them. And then, you know, as they get to kind of that big, you know, you can still keep sort of, sort of pulling at them. The Victorian trick for storing them over the winter months was basically what they do is they take them out of the ground, take the leaves off to minimise the moisture loss from the actual turnip itself, and then store it either wrapped in newspaper or in dry sand in a cool shed or whatever, and then they should store for a few months in there. That's the Victorian trick. As I say, I've never personally done that. I normally leave them in the ground and then just take them out the ground as I need them. But you can store them in that. If you get some boxes, fill that with dry sand and then bob them in the sand, they'll store quite nicely. Or wrap them in newspaper and then put them in the shed in a box, and then they'll kind of store that way as well. The other thing you can do is, as you suggested, you can chop them up and freeze them as well. But I would suggest that storing them in the shed is probably going to be easy, because if you've got lots of them, it's going to fill your freezer up. The next comment comes from Victoria Holmstrom again, and she said she's going to sow parsnips next year. The best tips very quickly for parsnips is if you're growing parsnips, what you need to do is prepare the ground, make sure you've got no stones in the ground. So, you know, you want a ground which has got almost no stones in it, well draining with no stones. Don't put any manure or anything like that in the ground, or any organic material, any compost, because that's what will encourage them to split rather than just having one single root. So basically put them in ground that you've put compost on or muck this year, so it's all rotted down in the ground, so it's all kind of mixed up. That's pretty much the same for carrots and stuff like that as well. With your parsnips, what I suggest you do is get 3 different varieties of parsnip, and then sow them all on top of each other, so you've got all 3 of them in the same row. Because dependent on the weather, different varieties grow better. And with parsnips, they are quite tricky to germinate. As soon as they've germinated, they're away. That's it. They're easy to look after. You basically just leave them to it, keep them well weeded, and they'll grow quite nicely. But germinating parsnips are quite difficult, and you need to germinate them in the ground ideally. You can do a parsnip propagator like I've done, which kind of gets around it, but the best way to grow parsnips is directly sowing the seed into the ground. If the conditions are reasonably cool, what you can do is put some plastic over the row. What you do want to do is water them once when you put them in, and then don't water them again ideally. You don't want them to be too wet. You want to keep them moist but not wet. So if you have got a lot of rain or cold weather, it's better to put some clear plastic over the top of them for them to germinate. The other tip that I can give you is parsnips will take up to 4 to 5 weeks to germinate. So if you haven't got anything there straight away in the first couple of weeks, don't worry. Parsnips are slow germinators, and it can take up to 2 or 3, 4, 5 weeks before you actually see anything coming. The only other thing you can do is put the parsnip seeds into a tray with some tissue and wet tissue in there, and chip the actual seed, so you get the seed and then you get the little root coming out of the seed. As soon as you see the little root coming out of the seed, then it's started to grow. You can then put it in the ground. That's another tip you can use. But as I say, parsnips are difficult to germinate, but as soon as you've got them to germinate, they're away, and they're a very easy crop to grow.
So I hope this episode has been some use to you. Please don't hesitate to put any comments or questions you've got below, and I'll always get back to you. And I'll see you on the next episode. Jim's Like My Garden.